What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Vibe Check Pod. This is Carter. It's Motivation Monday. I'm excited to finally get you your first episode of Vibe Check Pod on this beautiful Monday. I know we had a rainy weekend here in North Carolina, but it looks like the sun's starting to pop out. So I figured let's go ahead and get this podcast started. If you're new to the channel or the podcast, it's Vibe Check Media hosting Vibe Check Pod. Every day throughout the week, I'm going to come out with content. On Motivational Monday, I'm going to have different topics to help influence your week, influence my week, help us get our mindset going in the right place. Just as a little bit of a disclosure before I get started on the podcast today, I want to make sure it's clear that my intention is not to come across as an expert with any of the stuff that I discuss. I'm really learning with you guys, and then I'm thinking through examples in my own life that I've had with these situations and how I've applied them or could apply them moving forward. But hopefully, through this podcast, we all get smarter, better, faster, stronger, happier, big time happier is the whole goal. So for the topic today on Motivational Monday, I chose to discuss fight over flight. Um, if you've never heard of that before, which I would be surprised, honestly, fight over flight is a theory that was first come up with by Cannon. Cannon developed the theory of fight versus flight, and the whole goal of it was originally just how our species reacts to stress or emotional situations. Um, from my understanding, actually, as I did some research prior to recording this podcast, I learned that there's a little bit more development to the fight or flight theory. So, for starters, the definition of fight or flight essentially it's saying when something happens to you that causes stress or emotion, you can choose to fight, which would be to face that threat aggressively right now. You can choose flight, which would be running away from the danger or the threat. So those were the two that I've always been familiar with. Those were the two I was originally going to discuss. But as I did a little bit more research, I came and I found out that now this theory has two expanded topics, which are freeze and fawn. So now it is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And if you add freeze into it, means in that situation, you will just stop. You go cold, you do nothing. And then fawn, that means you immediately act to please the threat in hopes that the threat will discontinue. So I'm going to break down a few different aspects of this and go over a couple examples that I have in my life. Um, See if we can't get you guys motivated, you guys and girls motivated today. So the funny thing about this whole thing is, I think every situation you're in, you can choose one of these four things. I personally don't think it has to come from a place of stress or danger, but that's where the theory was derived from. So if we take it to that sense, then my my idea is, okay, so if something happens to me or if I'm in a situation that was unexpected, heck, maybe it was expected but it just didn't go as planned, um then now I have to choose one of these four things. And same goes for all of you. Anytime you find yourself in a situation, now you have to decide which of these four ways you're going to respond. Funny part about it is you can start to choose one way and then turn to another, but this is all about your instinctual response to the situation. So the whole goal of actually studying this and practicing this is to create an angle that you choose and that you go with every single time you find yourself in a terrible situation. Um, so Here's a good example because, to be honest, the crazy part about it is, as I think it through, is if you think about the concept of flight and running away from a danger or a threat, the crazy part about that to me is that's probably the easiest thing to do. Whenever something's hard in our lives or whenever we're facing some form of added pressure, the easiest thing we can possibly do is try to ignore it or run away from it. I think fight is probably the hardest one to do. To stand up against something and to take it head on. Essentially, imagine a storm that's coming down outside. It's kind of like it was this weekend. If you choose flight, you stay inside the whole weekend. You don't do anything about it. And I know that's a basic concept of it being storming. Nobody wants to go out in a storm. I get it. But conceptually, if you were to go out into the storm, can there be anything good that comes from that? And so as I explore this topic, I've come to realize that I feel as humans, the flight is the easy response. That's the easiest way you could react to something. If you're in a relationship, let's say you're in a relationship for a long time, and all of a sudden he or she leaves you unexpectedly. If you choose flight, you're going to act like it's okay. You're going to run away to social media. You're going to start probably even posting posts that make you look happy when you're not. Whereas fight, I think in that type of situation, the fight response would involve maybe crying a little bit, showing your emotions, maybe reaching out to that person and figuring out what went wrong, trying to develop out of that situation in some way, shape, or form. Um, so I thought about myself as I was putting together this podcast, and I feel like there's a lot of times in my life where I've chosen flight, and unfortunately, it doesn't get you anywhere. It puts you in a position where you're running away from your fears, you're running away from the danger, and if you always run from the storm, then you're never going to want to get wet. However, if you decide to run into the storm and you come back and all you did was got a little wet and you realize that storm wasn't as crazy as you thought it could be, now you just built a little bit of endurance and a little bit of capacity to deal with the storm. Um, so I think about in my life, a good example was when I graduated college, I immediately went into real estate. And in real estate, I'm not going to say I failed, but I certainly didn't succeed. I was a real estate agent for close to 2 years, and I sold 3 properties and I rented out about a dozen. And for anybody who's in real estate, you know, if you sell 3 properties and rent out a dozen in the course of 2 years, you're not making a livable wage, to be quite honest with you. Um, so then I got a job at Red Ventures, and Red Ventures was a job where you just answer the phone. It's inbound sales, so you're answering the phone all day. I worked for the AT&T sector, so imagine if you're on the consumer side of it and you're looking to get AT&T set up at your house, or you're looking for one of the discounts that you saw on the commercial, then you would call into AT&T, and then one of us would answer, and then our job was to bring you through that call, and sign you up with services. So I actually, a quick story about me at Red Ventures, it didn't take me long for the job to click. You get paid on conversion. So that means any call that you take, which you have to take every call that comes through, you can't sit idle. Any call that you take, if you do not close that call or set that person up with service, then that's a no close. And the more no close situations you have, the less you get paid per sale. So essentially, the more you can convert a phone call into a closed sale, the higher you're getting paid per sale as well, which is, it's an interesting concept. But I share that with you because I ended up dominating at Red Ventures for a couple months straight. My third month at the company, I was the number one salesperson in AT&T. Number one. They called it Agent Zero. Um, I remember I got to play a live Deal or No Deal game, and they gave me like $350 cash that day. And then the next month I came in, I was Agent Zero again, and there was an Xbox One S just sitting on my desk. And I'm not trying to gloat about this stuff. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of intel into what actually happened. Um, the compliance at Red Ventures was one of those things where it was a scripted job, and there were a lot of scripted pieces that you had to say. You could not omit anything. So the terms and agreements that you see at the end of something, they were completely. We had to read them out to you at the end of the call before you signed up. So it was pretty. It was substantial, the amount of script that you had to read on each call to close the deal. And then essentially, if you miss a line, you could miss the first two words of an 8-paragraph part of the script, and compliance would catch that, and you get 2 strikes. So my first strike happened because I did not mention the length of time of the contract. So I didn't mention that it was a 12-month contract. There were multiple times throughout the call where I made that loud and clear. The client knew that it was a 12-month contract, but when I got to the scripted part where I had to read it, I apparently omitted it. So that was strike one. So then this is a true story. So I'm Agent Zero for 2 months straight. Everything that I've talked about, Xbox, I'm living my best life. I'm living with my mom at the time, actually. I go home to my mom every night. I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. I'm the top dog. I'm genuinely the top dog. And if you're wondering what this is in front of me, this is my sock mic, just so you know. It probably looks weird just sitting in the camera. I could have moved it out, but who cares? Um, but essentially, I'm getting into this role. I start to figure it out. I become Agent Zero. I'm going home to mom, telling her, "Hey, I might be able to move out. I'm actually making money now. Things are looking good." So I go in on a Tuesday morning, and all of my stuff from my desk is in a box. And my manager says, "Come with me." Takes me immediately to HR. This is there's no warning of this. There's nothing of this. This is me coming into work for a regular day, getting immediately taken to HR at 8 a.m. HR says, "Hey, we pulled a call from 2 weeks ago, let's say, and you didn't mention to this client um, that they had AT&T internet available. You only sold them the DirecTV. This was at the time where DirecTV and AT&T were still big together. Now, I guess you can get just AT&T um, TV instead of using DirecTV, which is cool. But point being is this was a completely unexpected situation. They called me in. I'd never met the HR people before this, besides maybe the first day of training where they make you sign away your life and all the documents. And they say, yeah, so because you didn't mention that AT&T internet was an option for this client and you only signed them up for TV, you're terminated effective immediately. I remember that moment because I tried to fight the call because we had this system. It was called inmyarea.com. Actually very useful for you if you move to a new apartment or new place and you don't know what the internet provider is. Use inmyarea.com. You can put in your zip code. It'll tell you exactly what providers are available to you there, save you some time. And that's what we would do. So that way when we're on the call, we could pull their area up and we could tell before having to run a credit check. Essentially, if we didn't use In My Area, then we could potentially run a credit check on somebody who doesn't have AT&T internet available, and that doesn't do anybody any good. Red Ventures didn't care if we did that, but for the consumer, it's not good because then it's a soft credit tab. So they called me in with HR. Hey, on this call a few weeks ago, um, you omitted the fact that they had AT&T internet available. And I remember the call vividly because the person was loud and clear that they only wanted television. We were supposed to, even if somebody was like that, we were still supposed to pitch them the internet, try to get the double sale. In this case, I was zipping through it. I was getting them set up with the TV they wanted, didn't offer them internet. So, boom, I go from struggling in real estate for 2 years to finding a job with Red Ventures to becoming very talented at the job with Red Ventures to being in a HR office being terminated immediately. So I walked out of the building with my box right then and there. I didn't know how I was going to talk to my mom. I didn't know how I was going to come home and tell her, yeah, they fired the number one agent of AT&T. Um, and so I went home, and to be honest, at first, it seemed like I was, I guess, reflecting on it, I was choosing um, the flight tactic. I started to, I was crying, I was sad. I didn't have any answers. I didn't know what I was gonna do next. I felt like a fool because I had just left real estate and had some things going for me. I had been bragging to my mom that I was going to be getting out of the house because I was making some decent money. And then here we are, no job, nothing. And at first, I started to sulk. I started to be sad about it. I had one of those good old classic pity parties, if you will. Um, so then what happened is my brother got off of he got off of work that day, and he called me up and he said, hey man, what's going on? You know, if anybody doesn't know my brother's Austin, and he's the best brother you could ever possibly have. And I don't say that to be cheesy just because it's a podcast. I mean, this is a real life moment that happened, and it changed the way I think in these situations. And I remember I was talking to him, and I'm saying, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm blaming everybody but myself. I'm blaming Red Ventures, blaming my manager, saying how life is unfair, the whole nine. Um, and my brother said to me, he said, dude, if there's anybody that I know is going to figure this out, it's you. And that froze me for a bit. I wasn't expecting to have somebody support me like that in this type of situation. Um, so I think just to pause here in the story, I think it's important when you are in a situation that's stressful or emotional. I think it's very important to understand who your support systems are. Um, if you don't have a support system, then hit me in the comments. I mean, find one. There's so many people out there and resources out there that can get you plugged into the right group and the right topic. Nobody has to be isolated. So back to this quick story, or not so quick story. He tells me that it hits me home pretty good. I get a tear to my eye, honestly, in a good way. I feel plugged in at this point. So this is still the same day that I got fired from Red Ventures. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to have any clue what to do forever. So then he tells me that we get off that phone call. I immediately pull out my computer and I started applying for 10 different jobs. And right as I started applying for 10 different jobs, I don't think it was an hour later that I got a call from a recruiter from a company called Town Square. And she ran me through what the job was. And I kid you not, this job was exactly what I would be looking to do. It was a cold call job. We're selling digital marketing. You're prospecting your own prospects. So it essentially allowed me to use my sales skills. It aligned with my skills, but it also gave me a little bit more flexibility and freedom in the way that I operated, as opposed to having to read a script the whole way through. So that Friday, this was on a Wednesday, I get the first interview scheduled for that Friday. I go in on that Friday and have my first interview. They say, perfect. We liked your interview. We want you to come back next week. When do you want to come back? Now I'm in that fight mindset. I say, I'll come back on Monday. So they invite me back on Monday for my second interview where I shadow. Um, and I have to make some live calls. And so I go into that second interview. I shadow for about 30 minutes. I make 2 live calls. And then the manager at the time, she pulls me back to the interview room and they're like, dude, this is spot on what we're looking for. We've loved both of our interviews. We can't hire you on the spot, but be on the lookout for a call shortly. So I left in good spirits, and the next day on Tuesday, I got the call back, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to officially offer you the job, and you would start the following Monday." Um, so using this as an example, I got fired on Wednesday. So in less than 2 weeks, I was starting a new job. And for those of you that don't know, because I'm sure a lot of you who keep up with me, you know that Town Square ended up being a huge part of my career. Um, but for those of you who don't know, I ended up staying with Town Square for 5 years from that point. I worked my way from a sales rep to a senior sales rep to a management position within a year and a half. I was a manager for 2.5 years. And then I went back into sales. Um, and so my whole point of explaining that story, again, none of this podcast is built just for me to boast and brag about my life. It's supposed to be an example here. And if you take that scenario, I don't know if anybody's going through the same thing, but let's take this exact scenario. Right now, the job that you're in, whether you like it or not, I'm sure you're stable at it, and that's why you haven't left it yet. There's got to be some reason you're there. And imagine right now that that job came and told you that you're fired, you're gone, you kick rocks. This is where fight, flight, freeze, or fawn comes into play. In that situation, if you choose flight, or if I chose flight, I probably would have played PlayStation for 2 weeks. I would have submitted maybe one resume a week just to say I did it. I would have drinking a lot of Mountain Dew and I would have had a lot of sob parties. I probably would have even been hitting all my buddies up and been asking them if they want to go out and drink for the next day or 2 days. And the thing about everything involved with flight, although that sounds fun, although that sounds easy, is all of that option would negatively affect me. It would negatively affect you if you chose the same thing. Now, if you talk about fight, which is what I feel I chose to do there, all thanks to my brother telling me that one thing, if anybody's going to get through this, it's going to be you. If he didn't tell me that, I probably would have chose flight, to be honest with you. But I chose fight. And then now by choosing fight in a shorter time period than I could have imagined in my wildest dreams, I started a job that ended up being the biggest highlight of my career to this date. Um, so in my opinion, if you choose fight, it's going to be tough. It's going to be quick. It's going to be hard. But what comes out on the other side is going to be a lot stronger, a lot better, a lot more clear than what you are in right now. If I were to choose freeze, then I wouldn't have submitted any resumes. I wouldn't have done anything. I would have cried to my mom that night and the next night and the next night. And essentially, I wouldn't have changed a dang thing. I wouldn't have applied to a single job. I would have stayed put in where I was at for as long as possible in hopes that, I don't know, maybe another job would come my way. And then the last option is fawn, which would be to act to please right away. So I don't know how fawning would be in this situation. I guess fawning would almost be trying to reach out to my manager from Red Ventures right when they fired me and apologizing, or writing a letter and apologizing and almost succumbing to the fact that they had fired me even though I didn't agree with it, and almost begging for that job back. And so you'll notice that if you choose to freeze in a situation that's no good, then you're just going to stay where you're at. If you choose to fawn in a situation that's no good, then you're going against your values. You're going against what you value as a person. If I were to apologize for something that I truly did not believe I did, if I were to go begging for a job back that I believed fired me for no reasonable cause, then that would have been against my values. That would have been me being a completely different person than I am. And that's not the goal in any of these situations. So I share that with you guys because I think it's a good breakdown of what fight or flight is. Because anytime you're in a situation, I've talked about the relationship situation. Let's say you're going through a bad breakup. Let's say you just lost your job. What if you have so many bills to pay that you've lost track of your income and now you can't afford your bills? Let's imagine that situation. If you choose flight in that situation, it's only going to get worse. If you choose freeze in that situation, only going to get worse. If you choose fawn in that situation, that means you would still be going out, still be paying for things you don't need to, even though you can't pay for your actual bills. That's only going to make things worse. If you choose to fight in any of those situations, you're going to come out a better person. You're going to come out stronger. You're going to come out with more of a clear mind on who you are and what you want in this world. So I'm urging everybody, if you're listening to this, if you're thinking through this in your own aspects or in your own life, I really urge you to choose fight. And the crazy thing about it is flight, freeze, and fawn, those are the easy options, you guys. Those are the easiest way to handle stress or handle adversity. Fight, it's going to be the most difficult way to handle adversity. I promise you that. It's not going to be easy. If you got bills to be paid and you don't know how to pay them, then you got to find a way to make money and make it legally. If you just got through a bad breakup and that person left you and now they're with somebody else, you got to fight and you got to find your identity again. If you lost your job, you got to fight to get a new one. It's as simple as that. So I'm urging you, whatever situation you're in right now, good, well, I guess not good or bad, but whatever bad situation you find yourself in, even if you've just talked yourself into it, fight out of the situation. Do not stand still. Do not change your values and try to please when you know you're not pleased yourself. Do not run from the situation. Because here's the thing, too, that I'm understanding through this conversation with you guys is flight, freeze, and fawn. Not only do they make you weaker, but they also don't solve the problem. So if you choose flight, if you choose freeze, if you choose fawn, that problem is only going to breathe. It's going to get stronger. It's going to get more bearing until at what point does it just overtake you? I don't know. That point could be different for everybody. But if you choose fight, you're taking inch by inch everything that you can do in that moment to get right. For example, you get left by your significant other. You find out they're with somebody else. Start focusing. If you choose fight, That means you're going to start focusing on your happiness and nothing else. That might mean spending more time with your family. That might mean going to the gym more. That might mean finding a hobby that can keep you entertained and keep your mind off of the heartbreak you just went through. If you're struggling to pay your bills and you choose fight, that means you're going to be door dashing. That means you're going to be skipping or rovering the dog walking apps. That means you're going to find a job at a restaurant that's going to let you serve in the meantime while you're seeking your next career. There's so many options under the fight column, and there's a few options under flight, freeze, and fawn. But the fight column is going to take work. It's going to take effort. It's going to take a lot for you to fight for what you want. But if you choose fight, something good's going to come out of it. In this situation, just as a small example, I went very quickly from woe is me, I lost the job that I just figured out, to starting a career and making the most money I ever had in my life for 5 years straight. For those next 5 years, I made more money every single year factually. I'll show you my tax forms. No, I won't. But it is a fact that every year moving on after I chose fight in that little moment, I made more money than I had the year before. So again, what is it? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is your response to a stressful or emotional situation. Your response. There's nobody else to blame. You can think about other things. You can think about how you ended up in this situation, but you can't stay there. So act. Get on your feet and act. Choose fight. Because when you choose to fight, the problem will slowly go away. And I don't mean it'll disappear, but I mean you'll start to feel better. You'll start to feel stronger. You'll start to feel happier. Take any of those situations I've discussed today. If you can't pay your bills and you decide to DoorDash, every single time you make a delivery, you just chunked away at the problem. If you're in a relationship that just ended abruptly and you decide that you're going to go to the gym every day to put your mind on something better than thinking about this relationship you just went through, now you're getting stronger. Now you're getting better with yourself. You're getting healthier in that moment. If you just lost your job and you start applying aggressively to other jobs immediately, now you're giving yourself an opportunity to advance your career instead of staying put. So that's what I've learned through this is if you choose flight, if you choose freeze, if you choose fawn, you're choosing to close your eyes and you're choosing to take a step back. And in that situation, the problem's going to get worse and the problem's going to compound. But if you choose fight and you step forward inch by inch, that problem's slowly going to dwindle away. If you're paying $10 more on your credit card every single month than the minimum payment, then you're going to get rid of that payment sooner than later. Then if you paid the minimum every month and then skipped a payment, you're only going to be paying those payments even longer. So again, it's just a small example, and I hope this was helpful as episode 1. I'm not scripting any of this stuff. I have a little bit of a flow chart so I don't go too far off topic, but hopefully this was helpful for you. 30 minutes. Please leave a comment on this video, or if you're on my Instagram, Vibe Check Media LLC, then please leave a comment. Let me know what I could be doing better. My goal is to get better every single week that I do this. My goal is to bring you guys content that actually motivates you. So again, in summary, the choice is yours when you're in a situation of adversity. You can choose to fight against it, to battle back, to relieve the problem and get rid of it altogether as you fight and stand up for yourself. Or you can choose to run from it. You can choose to stay still and do nothing, or you can beg and plead at the knees of mercy and hope that the problem solves itself. So the choice is yours. And I thank you for coming to podcast 1, Vibe Check Pod. We out. Motivational Monday. We're choosing fight over here. What will you choose?